controversial questions, I would say. So hopefully we can leave this conversation on an interesting and informative question here. I'll direct it first for Isha, and then Dan and Garrett to respond, and if we have time, Bruce and Rachel, feel free to chime in. But this one is about alt proteins, consolidation, and food sovereignty, so that kind of nexus of topics. So a tension that surfaced frequently in our interviews, and questions from this session from AVA relates to alt proteins and food sovereignty. And specifically, some food system transformation leaders who prioritize food sovereignty worry that the private intellectual property, or IP, associated with many alt protein technologies will further consolidate power and wealth in the hands of large companies, perhaps even deepening control by the conventional meat industry. At the same time, we know that for investors and entrepreneurs, IP is often a foundational element needed to ensure competitive edge or investment, like Isha was saying. We also recognize that the conversation around food sovereignty can be very different depending on geography and context. So Isha, I'll ask you first, and then Dan and Garrett, can you speak to these tensions between alt protein industry development, food sovereignty, and corporate concentration? Big question.
Yeah, I really like this as a follow-up to the alt protein exceptionalism question, because it kind of is the same thing. It's like we're trying to advance these technologies, and it has to be tasty, cheaper, accessible to everyone, and not cause consolidation, and this, and this, and this. And you know, I think we all want the vision of a food system which is much more distributed, where ownership is not consolidated and so on. But that's really hard to do, and it's a really hard, like so many other societal changes need to happen in order for that to be enabled. And so I think the thing where I find disagreement maybe the most in my work is envisioning, you know, would we be happy if there was like a Cargill for cultured meat? Like, would that be cool or not cool? And I feel like some people think, yes, it would be cool because they wouldn't be killing animals, and it would be a much better system going forward. And then others would say no, because then the kind of, there's no reins in what prevents them from going a certain direction, or actually still including animals. Why would they even get rid of it? So I think what we need to consider at this stage is what are the kind of guardrails we want to put up for the field that keeps mission central, so that even if there is a big company or a small company, they're held to the same standards that keep mission central, that we are not going to harm animals, this is actually going to be more sustainable in a measurable way, and so on and so forth. And even better, could we impose those same guardrails on animal agriculture so that they have to hold up to them too? Because a lot of the benefits that we talk about for alt proteins kind of counts on a lessened dependence on animal agriculture. So you can't just have all of both and expect to have a changed world. So, you know, now I think is a very important moment for standards and norms and these guardrails to be designed in a very collaborative way across different organizations, across people who have worked with animal agriculture, across the people in the technical side, to figure out, okay, what do we actually care about, and what do we want to measure? And it doesn't have to be huge. It could be as simple as a kind of, you know, guidelines and principles to inform the path forward, which we actually saw happen with GMOs in the Asilomar conference. So there's like a lot of precedent for this in science, and we need to try to start imposing that kind of thing in the alt protein space. I'm specifically talking about celiac. I think it would be different things would be needed for plant-based maybe, yeah, that's what we need to do next.
Thank you, Isha. Yeah, maybe I'll look to Dan first. We'd love to hear from the investment perspective, and then we can go to Garrett.
Sure. I believe in the markets. I believe in the power of time. I believe that if we look far enough down the road, a lot of these things will come together. If we think about it, during the 20th century, the goal of food companies was to produce more. That's it. There was a growing population, everybody was much more distributed. How can we produce more food and get it to everybody? Period. And if you look through a lens of 50 years, they accomplished it. And I think now the next goal, we need to think about both food security and environmental impact. And I think entrepreneurship is going to take a big part of it. So I think the rules will be written during the path. And yes, there will be some IP that is proprietary. At some point in time, governments will intervene and say this is a national security issue. And it will have happen, I think, either through organizations, the EU, the US, or it will be in a much broader context at international level. I don't think having IP is bad. I don't think the large food corporations are bad. I don't think there is evil. It's people trying to do right by themselves, by their family, under what they have considered as normal. So for us to be part of the new normal, I think time will be part of the solution. We just need to let it flow through. And slowly, I do see big change. I will just say, 6 years ago, I went with Bruce to Mexico City, my first time on a panel talking about this. And back then, when I started doing this, all my friends and family thought I was nuts. Today, everybody that I know in Mexico has tried a vegan product. And the opinions vary, but the awareness is there, and in a very short period of time. So I'm very, very hopeful for the future.
So I believe in markets insofar as they are constrained by governance that make sure those markets actually deliver, right? And so, yes, we produce enough food on the planet today to feed everyone, but there's still 800 million people around the world who are experiencing acute hunger. And that's mostly a product of some market failure, but really of governance failure and conflict. And so that, to me, is the real challenge. And to the question of sovereignty, I could go on for a while from a kind of conceptual perspective. I have some issues with that term at times. I think it often gets used to suggest this kind of autonomous, separate zone. And when I look at things that often use that term, sovereignty, I actually think that they're more embedded in structures, in conventional structures, than folks maybe want to admit. So the question to me is I come back to this principle of justice. I think that is a more useful framework for me and for the industry than sovereignty specifically. And there's a quote from Huey Newton, who was the founder of the Black Panther Party. It's always stayed with me through work I've done on food justice for years, which is that you can't drop out of the system without dropping out of the universe. You contradict the system while you're in it until it's transformed into a new system. And I think that is what I would encourage folks to figure out, right? It's like, I think markets in this context are powerful, are important, are vital, but how do we contradict some of the market logics as they've taken shape and have not addressed all of our problems? And I think it requires a diverse group of folks like we have in this room that are some folks taking more conventional reformist approaches with institutions, some folks taking more radical approaches, challenging those institutions. That's the kind of healthy ecosystem that I think we need to be pushing each other. Let's contradict this system until it's transformed into a new one.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I know we have 2 minutes. Bruce, if you want to chime in really quickly, we have a moment for that.
Thank you. So GFI is just north of 200 full-time staff around the world at this point. The plurality of those team members are scientists. We bill ourselves as, and we are, a scientific think tank that is focused on open sourcing as much research into how to biomimic the precise meat experience with plants or cultivate meat directly from cells. Our global battle cry is that governments should be funding this. McKinsey did some science. They said $10.1 billion a year, which is nothing compared to clean energy transition. So I do think most of the incoming, and this is for people who are concerned about consolidation, this is how you make sure there's not consolidation. I do think what Garrett said, fear around food and food technology is a big part of the incoming. Anti-capitalism is a big part of the incoming, like the attacks on alternative proteins. Ezra's column was just, we need funding for open access R&D. That's what his column was. And he got pilloried. When that is exactly what people should support if their actual concern is things like IP consolidation, et cetera, would be our hypothesis.
Thank you all so much. We didn't even get through a third of the questions that we wanted to talk about with our panelists here. I wish we had more time. We'll all be around after, so if you'd like to chat with us, we'd love that. Like Laura shared, SDI is coming out with a research report on this topic related to plant-based alternative proteins soon. But I'll just take us over a moment to say thank you so so much to all the wonderful experts who joined us here today. This was a fantastic conversation. We're looking forward to continuing it in our movement, and I'd love to take a moment to just give a round